Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Slovenia once again for the first time in what feels like a good long while. That of course means that we are also going to take a look at yet another of the beers from the latest instalment of the Davor box. So first and foremost, a massive shout out and thank you to Davor Širic, who is the OG and Slovenian beer mule here on Rampant Lion Reviews. It's thanks to him that you guys have been enjoying a steady stream of Slovenian beer reviews on the channel for a couple of years now. He sent me some cracking beers over the years. The standard of stuff in Slovenia is always on the rise, and he always throws in a couple of interesting beers from his cellar as well. His cellar is absolutely ridiculous. He's got a great knowledge of beer, very nice guy, and I'm sure you'll see him appearing on a few more streams at some point in the future. But yeah, big thank you to Davor once again, and I hope that you guys watching enjoy the Slovenian beers that we review here as well. But yeah, for this review then, we are going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. This is a style of beer that I've never had from a Slovenian brewery yet, and it's also a style that we don't get to review all that often on the channel either, so curious to see how it turns out. Fingers crossed it makes for another interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So yeah, for this one then, we are going to go to Ajdovščina in the Vipava Valley in the western part of the country, and we're going to have a look at my first beer from Castra Pivovarna. So this particular beer is simply called Dark. It comes in at 5% ABV, and this one is a Temni Lager, as they're calling it in Slovenian, but that is basically the equivalent of a Czech Tmavi or a German Schwarzbier. So yeah, dark lager beer, this one. I think this should be very, very interesting. But yeah, as I say, this is my first Schwarzbier, Tmavi, whatever you want to call it, from a Slovenian brewery, and it's my first beer in this particular style bracket in quite some time actually. I couldn't tell you what the last sort of Schwarzbier type lager beer was that I had, but yeah, these guys are known mainly for their session beers from what I understand, and yeah, hopefully we can try a few more of their beers at some point in the future. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Castra Pivovarna. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Slovenian beers that I've reviewed for you, and that's gradually being added to as I work my way through Davor's beers. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then, to tell you a little bit about Castra Pivovarna then. So there we go, and I will apologise in advance for any bad Slovenian pronunciations in this video. It's quite difficult to get all the little accents and things right. But anyway, so Castra, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Ajdovščina in the Vipava Valley in western Slovenia. But the company was founded back in 2016 by Alan and Knights Majeršec, if I'm pronouncing their name right, Majeršec, I think. But apparently, they first got the idea of brewing beer during a business trip to the US, where obviously they encountered a high number of microbreweries. But they brewed a few beers together using pre-made brew kits when they returned home, and they just kind of thought, well, you know, you can obviously do this to a far greater degree. So they then moved on to proper home brewing, all grain brewing in other words, and they brewed every weekend together in a garage for about 1.5 years apparently. But they would often split their brews in half and use different yeasts or hops that they found interesting, and that was their way of experimenting and learning more about the ingredients that they would use. But they realised that they wanted to focus on more kind of sessionable beers. I think they kind of saw a little bit of a gap in the market essentially in Slovenia for that, and when they decided that they were going to go commercial, that's the way they directed the brewery. But they've produced a number of lagers and a few lighter ales there as well. If you look through the different beers that they produce, there's a couple of like pale ales and things like this. There's 1 or 2 IPAs, and then there's a couple of different types of lager in there as well. But they released their first beer, which was a white IPA, at the Pivovarna festival in Ajdovščina back in 2017. But many of the recipes that they're producing today are based on beers that they brewed in the garage, and they are, you know, continually adding more beers to their repertoire. But the brewery takes its name, Castra, from the old Roman fort in Ajdovščina, and it can be found just a little bit to the north of the fort as well. And as of July 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 12 different kinds of beer. And like I say, they are mainly lower alcohol, kind of more sessionable type beers. Pale ales, a few IPAs, and lager beers. And there was one big Russian Imperial Stout in there, which sounded as if it would be very, very nice. So who knows, maybe we can review that one at some point in the future as well. But there are a few of the lagers that I would be very interested to try. So we'll see what we can do about that in the next edition of the Davor box. But yeah, that's all the information I could find on Castra Pivovarna for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. So as you can see, the artwork on this one is pretty straightforward, but it's kind of classy at the same time. You can see on the back of the bottle there is the Castra Pivovarna symbol, if you like, and it's made to look like ramparts of an old fort, which obviously is quite fitting. And you can see the bottle cap on this one is just plain and black. It would be quite cool actually if they could get that on the bottle cap. That would be quite nice, but they are quite a young brewery, so maybe that's something that they will do a little bit later on. But yeah, 330ml bottle, this one. As I said to you earlier, this one is a 5% Temny lager, as they're calling it in Slovenia, but basically that is the an analogue of the German Schwarzbier or the Czech Tmavy, a black lager beer, this one. So yeah, I'm curious to see whether this one leans a little bit more towards the Czech side of things or whether it leans a little bit more towards the German side of things, because the main difference for me between Czech lagers and German lagers would be the fact I've always found the German ones tend to be a little bit kind of lighter and crisper, whereas the Czech ones tend to be a little bit more slightly yeasty and kind of bready in a sense. So I have got a suspicion that due to, you know, historical and cultural ties and things like that, I've got a suspicion that this one might lean a little bit more towards the Czech side of things, if you like, because Slovenia was of course at one stage part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, as was what is now the Czech Republic. So yeah, we'll see how we get on. But yeah, as I say, 5.5% Temny, Tmavy, Schwarzbier, whatever you want to call it, this one. But let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. So as I've told you in previous videos, the definition of a lager beer is a beer that uses cold temperature fermentation, or bottom fermenting yeast as it's also known. The fermentations of these beers take place between about 8 and 12 degrees. And you've got various different types of lagers, of course, many of them shared between Germany and the Czech Republic. So for example, in Germany you have the Helles lager, and the Czech equivalent of that would be the Svetli. You've got the Märzen, the Vienna lager as well, which is the more kind of ambery coloured lager, whereas the Czechs have the Letzak. In Germany you've got the Dunkel. In the Czech Republic they have the Cherny, then of course German Schwarzbiers, and then Czech Tmavies as well. The Germans have the Doppelbock, and what's the other one? There is another one that's not coming to mind just now, but the Germans have the Doppelbock, and then the Czechs, of course, invented the Pilsner beer, the Pilsen beer, but of course that was a Bavarian brewer who developed that. So yeah, various different kinds of lagers out there, and of course, as we say, with with Slovenia having been part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire for a considerable chunk of its history, then not surprising that these guys brew lager beers as well. So yeah, anyway, that's your little history of lagers. We can focus on this beer now. So as you can see, and as you would expect from a sort of Schwarzbier, Tmavy type beer, this one has poured a lovely, very dark kind of ebony sort of rosewood colour there. It looks very, very nice. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass there. I can see quite a few bubbles going up towards the bottom of the head there. I have had this beer sitting for a little while, of course, so that might be one thing that's going on with this one There's only a little tiny bit of sediment visible at the bottom of the bottle though in there. And there's not really anything at the bottom of the glass either, so I'm guessing potentially this one might not be bottle conditioned. But yeah, one or two big bubbles, as I say, sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, and you can see the head is actually retaining quite well on this one. So it poured with just under a finger of a frothy, I would say sort of fawny coloured head. You can see the colour of that when I bring it up to the camera there, but it looks very, very nice actually. But in terms of colour, this beer is definitely a very dark, sort of ebony type colour. This one, a very kind of dark ebony, black as night colour, Coca-Cola, Pepsi Max, whatever you want to call it. But it certainly looks the part. So remember, when it comes to the colour of your beers, that's dependent on, one, the type of malts that you use. This usually determines the magnitude of the colour. A Schwarzbier, Tmavi, Temne as they call it in Slovenia, will use a little bit of black malt, I would say, or a little bit of carafa or something like this. But the wort boil is also going to play a role. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. But a lager beer like this one will probably have a wort boil of somewhere between 60 and 90 minutes. Any barrel aging or adjuncts, of course, can play a role, but not often in beers that are quite as dark as this one in determining the colour. But yeah, certainly looks the part, this one. So nothing untoward about the appearance of this beer when you consider what style it is. So let's have a closer look at the aroma then and see how we get on. Very curious about this. Ooh, that does smell really nice actually. So just on straight off with this one, what you're going to notice about this beer is that it has a very you get a lovely toasty bread crust to this one on the first impression, but there's also a good degree of sweetness to it, like a bit of toasty brown sugar there, and you also get a bit of a kind of brown bready character out of this one. So I'm going to say, just straight from the outset, I think it is going to be more similar to what you'll get from the Czech Tmavis than the German Schwarzbiers. And as I say, Czech ones a bit more bready and yeasty, whereas the German ones tend to be a little bit more kind of crisp in a sense. This beer just strikes me as being more Czech in character, if you like. But, you know, I guess we have to recognise that potentially the Temne is different, it's a kind of independent style. It could well be. Not 100% sure about that. I couldn't really find any particular information on that. But yeah, it certainly smells a little bit more kind of Czech leaning in its composition, if you like. But it smells very, very nice, this one. I do think it's a bit of a shame because, you know, Schwarzbier and Schwarzbiers and Tmavis and stuff like this are a little bit underrated and underrepresented. A lot of the lagers that are coming out from breweries now, many breweries are having a go at lagers. Most of them tend to be the likes of the Helles and the Pilsners and things like that. So the Dunkels and the Schwarzbiers aren't really getting a look in yet, but we'll see how that goes over the next little while. But yeah, the aroma of this one is very, very nice. But let's try and break it down for you a little bit before we taste the beer. So like I said, this beer has a lovely kind of toasty, slightly well-fired bread crusty backbone to it. You will pick up one or two little hints of woodiness in there, but there's a lot of a kind of brown, like a sort of sweeter brown bread sitting on top of that. This beer really gives you an impression of a kind of German rye bread. It's really like that, but it really works for it, this beer. It's very, very nice in terms of its aroma. It's almost got a tiny little touch of, it almost smells as if it's just got a tiny little touch of a slightly smoky element to it, but I think that might be my nose playing tricks on me. But yeah, the aroma of this one, toasty, well-fired bread crust, a lot of brown bread in there, and just one or two little woody undertones to it. There is an element of brown sugar in there. You do get a nice little touch of a sweet caramel right in the middle of the nose, but there's quite a bit of a more kind of toasty brown sugary element to this one. The brown sugars, of course, come across as a little bit lighter and as I say, slightly toasty in it. But yeah, I think that kind of describes the malty aroma that you get out of this beer. And the yeast, of course, will be playing a role in there as well. The yeast will be sort of thickening up the kind of bready aspects of the aroma in this beer too. But yeah, I really like how it goes together, and I really like how it goes together, this one, in terms of the malty and yeasty side of things. I'm excited to try it, I have to say. So on the hoppy side of the beer then, it kind of smells you know, noble-like in character. As I've said in previous reviews, you know, I think you get Slovenian hops, Czech hops and German hops. The Poles have got hops that are quite similar to these as well. But yeah, for me, when it comes to these noble type hops, the Slovenian ones tend to be very, very smooth, if you like. The Czech ones are a little bit more spicy, whereas the German ones are very kind of bright, and you can certainly get that nice, smooth, hoppy character out of this one. I'd be curious to know exactly what hop they've used in this. It didn't say anything about that on the website when I had a quick look earlier on. But yeah, it's certainly got a nice little bit of a smooth earthiness to it. You can pick up a tiny little bit of a herbal character in there, but you do have a little bit of floral character, and I think the grassiness is lovely in this. You can pick up a bit of that grassiness at the front of the nose there. It's not citrusy or anything, but it's still quite bright and just very, very smooth. So I do like how the green component in the hops comes out in the aroma of this beer. It's lovely. It really smells very, very nice, this one. On the fruity side of things, you know, there's not too much in the way of fruitiness in this beer, but you will get a little hint, you know, that very, very light figgy sort of thing, that very kind of light candied strawberry. There's just a tiny, tiny little hint of a red fruity note to this one, and of course you're getting a few of these, you know, peary, appley, grassy sort of esters coming out of the beer. These are always things that you get from lager beers. But yeah, tiny little bit of a sort of figgy, kind of black curranty type note in this beer. So I really like how this one goes about its business. It's very, very nice in that sense. So yeah, the way that this beer goes about its business is really, really nice actually. So the aroma is certainly very, very attractive, and it's very fitting for the style. But like I say, it leans a little bit more towards that kind of checked Mavi side of things. So yeah, let's have a little look at this beer then and see how we get on. That's the aroma covered for you. As I always say, take a little bit of time to appreciate the aroma of these beers before you taste them. But yeah, this one is simply called Dark, a 5% Temny, as they're calling it in Slovenia, but a checked Mavi, German Schwarzbier, whatever you want to call it, from Castra Pivovarna in Ajdovščina in Western Slovenia. Thank you again to Davor for making this review possible, but let's get stuck in. Slanje, skull, cheers, and na zdravje. Let's go for it. Oh yeah, that is very nice actually, very easy, easy drinking beer, this one. Good bit of flavour as well for the style too. I know that my friend Adam at Mercy Beers loves a dark lager. I can see him enjoying this one, so when I do get down to Slovenia I need to get a bottle or two of this for him. But yeah, that's very, very nice. But yeah, this beer gets a thumbs up from me. Now when it comes to rating this type of beer, what I would look for in these kind of things is authenticity, and this one gives you that. This is very much like a checked Mavi. I mean, it does have a few elements that you would expect off the German Schwarzbier, the slightly more crisp character. You do get elements of that out of this beer because it feels very clean to a degree, but the further you go into the aftertaste with it, it really, the sort of smoothness and the kind of prominence of the bread and yeasty characters in this one really make it more Czech, in my opinion. So yeah, and whether that's true of all the examples of Temny lager that you're going to find in Slovenia, I'm not sure. But in this case, this really is more of a checked Mavi than a German Schwarzbier. We'll leave it at that because we've been talking about that quite a bit in this particular video. So we'll focus on the beer itself and the flavour composition. But it's a lovely, lovely black lager beer, this one. So yeah, interesting stuff. So let's break down the flavour then. Straight away with this beer, across the middle of your palate, you can feel that kind of roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust, but at the same time, it's very, very smooth. So on top of that, you can feel there's a lovely little bit of there is just a little bit of a kind of smooth, brown bready kind of element to this one. It's not quite as sweet as the sort of rye bread-like aroma that I was getting out of the beer, but it's certainly a lovely, smooth, brown, wholemeal bready sort of thing, and there is just a little touch of that rye quality to it, like I say. What you'll notice is that in the middle third of your palate, if you move towards the front half of that middle third of your palate. You will get one or two very slightly woody undertones to this beer, but this one really is, you know, a little bit of a well-fired bread crust, as we say, then a lovely smooth brown bready character on top of it. You know, when you go into the back third of your palate, you will notice that the kind of the grainy elements of the sort of well-fired bread crust does get a little bit more intense and a bit more bitter towards the back of the palate, but the brown bready elements, they are very, very smooth in the middle third and the back third of your palate. So yeah, I do like how that goes together in this one. But let's focus on those two, the middle third and the back third of the palate separately for a minute, because there are a few little differences there. So middle third of the palate, this is where you're getting a little bit of the kind of brown sugary element out of the beer. So yeah, you will feel in the dead centre of your palate there is a little bit of a sweet caramel in there, and it's got a little touch of oiliness. But as you move further out from the dead centre of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of a sweet, you've got a little bit of a kind of toasty, you get a little bit of that kind of lighter, toastier brown sugar out of this one. So the brown sugars that you get in this beer are not overly sweet, they're actually very light and very slightly toasty, but I think that suits the overall vibe of this beer. You're also going to notice that it feels very, very clean in a sense. So it's almost like it's got the German mouthfeel, but the Czech backbone, if you like. I guess that's maybe a good way to describe what's going on in this beer. But yeah, that's the middle third of your palate then. So border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build up there, and you can feel a slightly more intense kind of well-fired grainy element there. But as we say, when you go into the back third of your palate, you've still got that smooth brown bready layer and the kind of toasty bread crusty kind of thing in the backbone. I'd love to know if they've used a little bit of carafa in this actually. The Slovenians of course have their own hops, and I'm sure malteries as well, so maybe it's a type of malt that I've not come across before, but I'd be very curious to know if there is a bit of carafa in this one. But yeah, on top of that more kind of brown bready layer though, on the back third of your palate, you can feel the yeasty element in this one. So the flavour of the beer is a little bit kind of taller on the back third of your palate, and as you move further forward it condenses down, particularly so as you go into that middle third of your tongue. But on top of that, you get a little bit more of a kind of air. You do get a little bit more of that kind of airy brown bready sort of thing. The other thing I would say about the malt base in this beer is it feels like the sort of wholemeal brown bready, rye bready sort of thing that this beer has. It really feels that thickens up a little bit the more that you drink of it, and I like that effect this one. So it starts off a little bit more crisp and then it thickens up a wee bit the more that you drink of it, and there's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, I like how that side of the beer goes about its business. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, I think we've covered the malty and yeasty side of the beer as much as we need to. But on the hoppy side of things then, it is quite similar to what you would pick up from the aroma. But yeah, back corners of your palate, you've got a lovely little bit of a smooth earthiness in there. As you move further forward from that, you get a little touch of a herbal quality, and it does gradually become a little bit more floral and aromatic as you reach the kind of front corners of your palate. Round the front curve of the tongue though, it's distinctly lighter and grassy, and there is a wee touch of a kind of zesty vibe coming out of this beer. So yeah, I like how that goes together. But the green component to the hops in this one, it does make me wonder if it's Slovenian hops in this, you know, maybe a bit of Styrian Goldings or Danner or whatever in this one. So yeah, I do like how that goes together. Lovely, noble green component to this one, and very smooth like you'll typically find from Slovenian hops. But yeah, let's focus on that front third of your palate then. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again there's a wee bit of a bready build up there. You get a little bit more of a slightly intense, well-fired bread crusty kind of thing, and the base of that front third of your palate tends to be a little bit more you can get a little bit of the well-fired bread crust underneath, but you do get a wee bit more of the smoother brown bready elements out of this beer too. And then on top of that you get that nice slightly oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters push their way out of the beer. But yeah, for me this one, it is quite, the fruity side of the beer is quite similar to what you pick up in the aroma. So when you first take this beer in, It does have a teeny little bit of sharpness. Well, sharpness isn't the right word. It's got a little bit of a kind of juicy red fruity character when you take it in, but it really mellows out slightly differently. So on the back of that front third of your palate, you certainly get a little bit of a more kind of figgy, juicy element to the beer. That's for sure. You can feel that, and the figgy qualities sort of move further forward along the front of the palate there. There's maybe a teeny little hint of a slightly sultana-like flavour in there, a little bit of a dried fruity note. And as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, it does get a little bit more slightly blackcurranty, and there's a wee tiny touch of like a black berry note in this one as well. So always, as I say, currants always come across as a bit lighter and juicy, and I think it's a more blackcurranty type element that you get on the front half of the front third of your palate in this one, if you like. But yeah, you certainly get a little touch of a peary element out of this one too, which is quite interesting. But of course, on that very front tip of your tongue, you've also got those kind of grassy esters that are playing a role in the flavour as well. But yeah, this is certainly a very, very nice, pardon me, black lager beer. This one, it's giving me a little bit of gas. Maybe, as I say, I've had this beer sitting a little bit, so potentially it's bubbled up a little bit more than it should. But yeah, it does come across very nice, this one. In terms of flavour profile, you can't really ask for much more than this one. And like I say, I would say that this beer has a little bit of the German mouthfeel to it and the German cleanliness, but it's got the Czech backbone, if you like. It's definitely got the Czech backbone to it. But let's summarise the mouthfeel quickly then to round off the review. So in terms of the body, this is a light-bodied beer. The carbonation does have a degree of crispness to it, like we said. And I'd say that you can feel the water quality in this one. Slovenia is quite a mountainous country, very beautiful country, and I do hope I can visit it, like I said. But it feels quite clean. You can feel the quality of the water in this beer, and I think that serves this beer very nicely, actually. And if it's the Vipava Valley, it's a valley, you're going to get good quality water there as well. In terms of IBUs from this beer, then. You're getting a bit of bitterness both from the malty backbone in this one and from the hops. I think this has maybe got about 25-ish IBUs, 20, 25, something like that. Take my IBU counts with a pinch of salt, though. This is my weakest point of beer reviewing, as I've said many a time on the channel. But yeah, I think about 20, 25 IBUs in this beer. As we said with the malt base earlier, it's got a bit of a roasty, dry backbone to it, but then it smooths out very nicely and gives you a degree of a slightly toasty sweetness the more that you drink of it, and you've also just got a little bit of a soft fruity character to the beer as well. But overall, this is a very, very nice example of a black lager beer. It's certainly got a little bit of the German mouthfeel to it, but I think the flavour profile wise and backbone wise, it really leans more towards a Czech Tmavy rather than anything else. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review. This was a really nice lager beer, and I'd be curious to try a few more from these guys. I think they had a sort of Dunkel type lager and also a Helles type lager, so I maybe need to see if Davor can get a hold of those for me in the next Davor box, of course. But yeah, this was really nice, and I'm glad that I got the chance to review this. So Davor, thank you again to you for making this review possible. But yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Castra Pivovarna. Not often that I get to review a Schwarzbier, Tmavy type beer, so give me some recommendations within this style bracket in the comment section below as well. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Castra Pivovarna's social media as well, and we will return to these guys again at some point soon, I'm sure. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys very soon. This was the Dark, a 5% Slovenian Temny lager, basically a combination, I guess, of a German Schwarzbier and a Czech Tmavy from Castra Pivovarna in Ajdovščina in the Vipava Valley in western Slovenia. Slanje, skol, cheers, na zdravje, and thanks for watching. See you soon.